The salt spray stung General Dwight David Eisenhower's face as he stood on the deck of HMS Belfast, watching the largest armada in human history cut through the choppy waters of the English Channel. It was June 6, 1944, and Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe, was finally underway after months of meticulous planning that would either liberate Western Europe or result in catastrophic failure. Eisenhower's weathered hands gripped the railing as he observed the coordination of forces that stretched beyond the horizon. Nearly 7,000 vessels of every conceivable type moved in synchronized formations across the dark waters. Battleships USS Nevada and HMS Warspite sailed alongside converted passenger liners, carrying American, British, and Canadian troops. Liberty ships loaded with supplies flanked destroyer escorts, while landing craft bobbed like corks in the rough seas. The Supreme Allied Commander had spent the previous evening agonizing over weather reports with his meteorologists. Group Captain James Martin Stagg had delivered the crucial forecast that convinced Eisenhower to proceed despite marginal conditions. The original date of June 5th had been postponed due to storms, and another delay could have pushed the invasion back weeks, potentially compromising the entire operation. Above the naval armada, the drone of aircraft engines created a constant rumble that seemed to make the very air vibrate. More than 13,000 Allied aircraft filled the skies in the largest air operation ever mounted. Douglas C-47 Skytrains carrying paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions flew in tight formations toward their drop zones. Behind enemy lines, Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses and consolidated B-24 Liberators headed toward strategic targets along the Norman coast, their bomb bays loaded with ordnance designed to crater German defensive positions. The coordination required for this massive undertaking had taken nearly 2 years to perfect. Operation Overlord represented the culmination of intense Allied cooperation that brought together military leaders from multiple nations under a unified command structure. British Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery commanded all ground forces, while Admiral Bertram Ramsay directed naval operations, and Air Chief Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory controlled air assets. As referenced in Stephen Ambrose's comprehensive account D-Day, June 6, 1944, the logistical complexity of coordinating these three elements simultaneously was unprecedented in military history. Intelligence reports indicated that German forces under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had transformed the Norman beaches into a fortress of steel and concrete. The Atlantic Wall consisted of bunkers, artillery positions, and obstacles designed to turn any landing attempt into a bloodbath. Rommel's strategy relied on stopping the invasion at the water's edge, believing that failure to repel the initial assault would doom German defensive efforts. Yet Eisenhower and his staff had developed an intricate plan to overcome these defenses. Through overwhelming force applied simultaneously across multiple vectors, the deception campaign, known as Operation Fortitude, had convinced German high command that the main invasion would come at Pas de Calais, keeping significant enemy forces away from Normandy. As dawn approached, radio communications crackled across the fleet with final coordination messages between ship captains, aircraft squadrons, and ground commanders. The moment of truth was approaching, and the success of the entire European campaign hinged on the next few hours of perfectly orchestrated chaos. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Vandervoort checked his watch as his C-47 transport aircraft crossed the Norman coastline at 1,200 feet. It was 0-1-15 hours on June 6th, and the men of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment were among the first Allied soldiers to touch French soil. The paratroopers sat in tense silence, their faces blackened with camouflage paint, equipment strapped tightly to their bodies as anti-aircraft fire began to light up the night sky. Around them, the airborne assault represented the opening phase of the Allied coordination strategy. Major General Matthew Ridgway's 82nd Airborne Division and Major General Maxwell Taylor's 101st Airborne Division had trained for months to execute precise drops behind enemy lines. Their mission was to secure key objectives including bridges, road junctions, and artillery positions that could threaten the beach landings scheduled to begin at dawn. Pathfinder teams had already jumped 30 minutes earlier, tasked with marking drop zones with special radar beacons and colored lights. These elite soldiers, carrying Eureka beacon sets, would guide the main force to their designated landing areas in the darkness. The coordination between pathfinders and transport aircraft required split-second timing, as even minor navigation errors could scatter entire units across the Norman countryside. Major General Richard Gale's British 6th Airborne Division simultaneously conducted their own operations on the eastern flank of the invasion area. Their primary objectives included capturing the Merville Battery and securing bridges over the Orne River and Caen Canal. The famous Pegasus Bridge assault, led by Major John Howard's glider-borne troops, demonstrated the precision required for these nighttime operations. As Vandervoort's aircraft approached the drop zone, German flak batteries opened fire with increasing intensity. Searchlights swept the sky while 88mm guns sent deadly bursts of shrapnel through the formations of transport planes. Several C-47s burst into flames, their crews and passengers lost in the darkness below, but the majority of aircraft pressed on toward their targets. The coordination challenges became apparent immediately upon landing. Many paratroopers found themselves scattered across unfamiliar terrain, separated from their units by hedgerows, flooded fields, and German defensive positions. Cricket toys, small metal devices that produced distinctive clicking sounds, became crucial communication tools, allowing scattered soldiers to identify friendly forces in the darkness. Radio communication proved particularly challenging during these early hours. Many SCR-300 radio sets were damaged during the jumps, forcing unit commanders to rely on runners and visual signals to coordinate their scattered forces. Despite these difficulties, small groups of paratroopers began achieving their objectives through individual initiative and improvised leadership. Colonel James Earl Rudder's 2nd Ranger Battalion faced perhaps the most daunting coordination challenge of the airborne phase. Their mission to scale the 100-foot cliffs at Point du Hoc and neutralize German artillery positions required precise timing with naval bombardment and close air support. The Rangers would need to signal their success to offshore naval forces to prevent friendly fire incidents during the beach assault. The British glider operations demonstrated another aspect of airborne coordination. Horsa and Hamilcar gliders, towed by Halifax and Stirling aircraft, carried heavier equipment including jeeps, artillery pieces, and anti-tank guns directly to their objectives. These silent landings required exceptional piloting skills and perfect navigation to reach small landing zones in enemy territory. By 0300 hours, scattered reports began reaching Allied commanders aboard naval vessels offshore. Despite the chaos and casualties, airborne forces were gradually securing their primary objectives. The seizure of key terrain behind German coastal defenses would prove crucial for the success of the amphibious assault scheduled to begin in just over 3 hours. Admiral Alan Kirk stood in the bridge of USS Augusta, watching through binoculars as the first salvos from his bombardment fleet erupted against the Norman coast. It was 0550 hours on June 6th, and the naval phase of Operation Neptune, the amphibious component of Overlord, was beginning with a thunderous display of coordinated firepower that shook the very foundations of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. The precision required for this bombardment demanded months of planning and intelligence gathering. Aerial reconnaissance photographs, taken by Royal Air Force Spitfires and American P-51 Mustangs, had identified every major German defensive position along the 50-mile invasion front. These targets were carefully cataloged and assigned to specific naval vessels based on their armament and position offshore. USS Nevada, a veteran of Pearl Harbor, trained her 14-inch guns on the formidable German battery at La Martiniere. The battleship's fire control systems, operated by seasoned gunners who had learned their trade in the Pacific theater, calculated firing solutions based on precise coordinates provided by shore fire control parties. Each salvo required coordination between spotting aircraft, naval observers, and gun crews to ensure accuracy while avoiding friendly forces moving inland. HMS Warspite, the legendary British battleship that had fought at Jutland in the First World War, engaged German positions at Villarville with her 15-inch guns. The coordination between British and American naval forces required standardized communication procedures and shared target identification protocols. Radio frequencies were carefully managed to prevent interference between different national contingents while maintaining effective fire control. The heavy cruiser HMS Belfast, carrying Admiral Philip Ian, coordinated the bombardment of German strong points along Gold Beach. Her 6-inch guns provided more rapid fire than the battleships, allowing for responsive support to developing situations ashore. The cruiser's advanced radar systems helped coordinate fire missions in the pre-dawn darkness. When visual observation was impossible, destroyer squadrons provided the most precise fire support. For the landing forces, USS McCook, USS Carmack, and HMS Taliban positioned themselves closer to shore, their 5-inch guns able to engage specific bunkers and machine gun nests identified by forward observers. The coordination between these destroyers and the incoming landing craft required constant radio communication to prevent tragic friendly fire incidents. The naval bombardment plan called for a carefully timed escalation of fire as HR approached. Initial long-range bombardment would target major defensive positions and artillery batteries. As landing craft approached the beaches, fire would shift to immediate coastal defenses. Finally, as troops reached the waterline, naval gunfire would lift to inland targets, maintaining support for advancing infantry while avoiding casualties among friendly forces. HMS Ramillies and HMS Roberts, specialized monitor vessels with heavy guns, engaged the massive German battery at Longues-sur-Mer. These shore bombardment specialists had been designed specifically for this type of operation, with shallow drafts allowing close approach to enemy coastlines. Their coordination with Royal Air Force spotting aircraft ensured accurate placement of rounds on heavily fortified targets. As noted in Admiral Samuel Eliot Morrison's definitive naval history, The Invasion of France and Germany, the complexity of coordinating over 600 naval vessels of various types and nationalities represented an unprecedented achievement in maritime warfare. The German response to this bombardment was immediate and deadly. Shore batteries that had survived the initial salvos began returning fire with remarkable accuracy. Hums Bilolo, serving as a headquarters ship, reported several near misses as German gunners attempted to disrupt Allied command and control functions. The battery at Le Havre engaged Allied destroyers with 11-inch guns, forcing frequent course changes. To avoid concentrated enemy fire, radio traffic between ships intensified. As the bombardment continued, fire control officers reported target damage, requested ammunition resupply, and coordinated with their spotters circling overhead. The successful execution of this massive bombardment would prove crucial for reducing German defensive capabilities. Before the first soldiers reached the beaches, Colonel George Taylor of the 16th Infantry Regiment crouched behind the steel ramp of Landing Craft Infantry 326 as machine gun bullets ricocheted off the metal hull. It was 0630 hours at Omaha Beach, and the first wave of American assault troops was learning that German defensive positions had survived the naval bombardment with deadly effectiveness. The coordination between sea, land, and air forces that had worked so precisely in planning was being tested under the most brutal conditions imaginable. The landing craft approached the beach in carefully coordinated waves, each timed to arrive at specific intervals to prevent overcrowding. On the narrow strips of sand, LCVP landing craft, vehicle, personnel boats, known as Higgins boats, carried 36 men each toward their designated sectors, the coxswains. Many of them experienced Coast Guard petty officers, navigated through underwater obstacles and artillery fire while maintaining formation integrity. Coordination challenges became immediately apparent as German defensive fire intensified. Many landing craft were hit before reaching the beach, forcing survivors to swim through cold water while carrying full combat equipment. Radio communications between ship and shore became sporadic. As water-damaged equipment failed and radio operators became casualties, the 2nd Ranger Battalion, under Lieutenant Colonel James Earl Rudder, demonstrated exceptional coordination skills during their assault on Point du Hoc, using specially designed rocket-fired grappling hooks and extension ladders provided by London Fire Brigade. The Rangers scaled vertical cliffs while under intense German fire. Their success required precise timing with naval gunfire support and coordination with follow-up waves carrying supplies and reinforcements. At Utah Beach, Major General Raymond Barton's 4th Infantry Division experienced more successful coordination. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the 56-year-old son of the former president, had convinced his superiors to allow him to land with the first wave. His presence on the beach provided immediate senior leadership for coordinating the movement of subsequent waves and supplies. The DD duplex drive Sherman tanks represented an innovative coordination solution between naval and armored forces. These amphibious tanks, equipped with collapsible canvas flotation screens, were designed to swim ashore ahead of the infantry and provide immediate fire support. However, rough seas caused many DD tanks to founder before reaching the beach, leaving infantry without crucial armored support during the critical first hours. Naval gunfire coordination became increasingly complex as friendly forces moved inland. Shore fire control parties, equipped with radio sets and trained in naval gunnery procedures, established communication with offshore vessels to direct fire missions against German strong points. These teams, often consisting of naval officers attached to Army units, served as the crucial link between sea and land forces. Combat engineers of the 5th and 6th Engineer Special Brigades faced the vital mission of clearing beach obstacles and establishing supply routes. Their coordination with infantry units required precise timing, as engineers needed to work in areas still under enemy fire, while avoiding interference with advancing assault troops. The engineers used Bangalore torpedoes and demolition charges to clear paths through German obstacles, including steel hedgehogs and concrete tetrahedra. Medical coordination proved equally challenging under combat conditions. Navy corpsmen and Army medics established aid stations in whatever cover they could find, while hospital ships offshore prepared to receive casualties. The coordination between beach medical teams, naval vessels, and rear area hospitals required constant communication despite damaged radio equipment and heavy casualties among medical personnel. The German defense, coordinated by the 352nd Infantry Division under Colonel Dietrich Krase, demonstrated the effectiveness of prepared positions and coordinated fire plans. Machine gun nests, mortar positions, and artillery observation posts worked together to create overlapping fields of fire that turned the beach approaches into killing zones. By mid-morning, coordination between the various elements of the assault began to improve as communication systems were re-established and senior commanders reached the beach. The successful coordination of this massive amphibious assault, despite initial setbacks, would prove decisive in establishing the crucial foothold in Nazi-occupied Europe. Group Captain Johnny Johnson adjusted his oxygen mask as his Supermarine Spitfire Mark IX banked over the Norman coast at 15,000 feet, leading the Canadian 421st Squadron. Johnson coordinated with ground controllers to provide close air support for advancing Allied troops. It was 0800 hours on June 6th, and the Royal Air Force's 2nd Tactical Air Force was demonstrating the crucial role of coordinated air power. In supporting the largest amphibious invasion in history, the Air Coordination Plan for D-Day involved multiple layers of aircraft operating at different altitudes and with distinct missions. Fighter aircraft maintained air superiority over the invasion area, while fighter bombers attacked German defensive positions and transportation networks. Medium and heavy bombers targeted strategic objectives deeper inland, and transport aircraft continued dropping supplies to airborne forces already engaged behind enemy lines. Air Marshal Arthur Cunningham's 2nd Tactical Air Force had spent months developing close air support procedures specifically for Operation Overlord. Forward air controllers, equipped with VHF radio sets, accompanied ground units to coordinate airstrikes on German positions. These specially trained officers, often pilots themselves, understood both air and ground operations sufficiently to ensure effective coordination between the two elements. The Hawker Typhoon squadrons of RAF Group No. 83 proved particularly effective in coordinating attacks against German armor and artillery positions. Squadron leader John Baldwin's 198th Squadron attacked German panzer reserves, moving toward the beachhead, using rocket projectiles and 20mm cannons to disrupt enemy counterattacks. The coordination between these aircraft and ground forces required precise identification of targets to prevent friendly fire incidents. American P-47 Thunderbolts of the 9th Air Force operated from forward airstrips in England, coordinating their attacks with British aircraft over the invasion area. Colonel Donald Blakesley's 4th Fighter Group maintained standing patrols over the beaches, ready to respond to calls for close air support from ground controllers. The integration of American and British air assets required standardized communication procedures and shared target identification protocols. Transport aircraft coordination proved equally complex as the day progressed. Douglas C-47 Skytrains continued resupply missions to airborne forces, dropping ammunition, medical supplies, and radio equipment to scattered paratroop units. These missions required precise navigation to avoid both enemy anti-aircraft fire and friendly naval vessels operating offshore. The coordination between air and naval forces presented unique challenges throughout D-Day. Aircraft spotting for naval gunfire had to operate at specific altitudes and follow designated flight paths to avoid anti-aircraft fire from Allied ships. Vado STU Kingfisher floatplanes, launched from battleships and cruisers, provided aerial observation for naval bombardment missions, while coordinating with land-based aircraft to prevent mid-air collisions. Bomber coordination reached unprecedented levels during the morning hours. The United States 8th Air Force launched over 1,000 heavy bombers against German coastal fortifications and transportation targets. Boeing B-17 flying fortresses and consolidated B-24 Liberators followed carefully planned routes to avoid both friendly aircraft and naval vessels, while delivering their ordnance with precision timing. As referenced in the comprehensive analysis by Air Marshal Arthur Tedder in his post-war memoirs. The coordination of over 13,000 aircraft from multiple air forces represented the most complex air operation ever attempted. German air response was limited, but coordinated. The Luftwaffe's 3rd Air Fleet, under Field Marshal Hugo Sparrow, managed only 300 sorties throughout the entire day. Focke-Wulf 190 fighters and Junkers 88 night fighters attempted to disrupt Allied operations, but were overwhelmed by the massive Allied air presence over Normandy. Weather coordination became increasingly important as the day progressed. Meteorological reconnaissance aircraft provided updated weather reports to help coordinate bombing missions and close air support operations. Cloud cover and visibility changes required constant adjustments to flight plans and attack procedures. Air-sea rescue coordination proved vital as the day continued. Supermarine Walrus amphibious aircraft and consolidated PBY Catalinas coordinated with naval vessels to rescue aircrew shot down over the channel. These operations required precise communication between rescue aircraft, naval vessels, and air-sea rescue control centers to ensure rapid response to downed flyers. The success of air coordination on D-Day established principles that would guide Allied air operations throughout the remainder of the European campaign. General Sir Bernard Law Montgomery studied the situation maps spread across the table in his command post aboard HMS Faulkner, coordinating the movements of over 150,000 Allied troops across 5 separate beach sectors. As overall ground commander for Operation Overlord, Montgomery faced the unprecedented challenge of coordinating British, American, and Canadian forces in the largest amphibious operation in military history. It was 1,400 hours on June 6th, and the complex web of command relationships established for D-Day was being tested under the most demanding circumstances. The Allied command structure represented months of delicate diplomatic and military negotiations. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight David Eisenhower maintained overall authority over Operation Overlord, while Montgomery commanded all ground forces during the initial phase. Admiral Bertram Ramsay directed Operation Neptune, the naval component, and Air Chief Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory controlled air operations. This unified command structure required unprecedented cooperation between previously independent national military organizations. Communication systems formed the backbone of Allied coordination efforts. The Combined Communications Board had established a network of radio, telephone, and telegraph links connecting commanders from ship to shore and between different national contingents. High-frequency radio sets maintained contact between floating headquarters and ground units, while underwater telephone cables connected major command posts with rear area supply bases. Montgomery's 21st Army Group coordinated the actions of Lieutenant General Omar Bradley's 1st United States Army and Lieutenant General Miles Dempsey's 2nd British Army. This coordination required standardized operational procedures, shared intelligence assessments, and compatible communication equipment. The complexity of managing forces from 3 different nations, each with distinct military traditions and equipment, demanded exceptional organizational skills. The coordination of logistics proved equally challenging throughout D-Day. Rear Admiral William Tennant, serving as senior naval officer for the artificial harbors known as mulberries, coordinated the positioning of massive concrete caissons and steel pontoons that would create artificial ports for supply operations. These engineering marvels required precise coordination between naval construction units, merchant vessels, and ground transportation organizations. Intelligence coordination played a crucial role in D-Day operations. The Allied Intelligence Committee, combining British MI6, American Office of Strategic Services, and other intelligence organizations, provided continuous updates on German defensive positions and troop movements. Ultra-intercepts decoded German communications, gave Allied commanders unprecedented insight into enemy plans and capabilities. Medical coordination involved multiple national medical services working together to treat casualties from all Allied nations. The coordination between British Royal Army Medical Corps, United States Army Medical Department, and Canadian Medical Services required standardized triage procedures. and compatible medical supplies. Hospital ships, field hospitals, and casualty evacuation aircraft worked together in an integrated medical support system. Supply coordination presented massive challenges as the invasion progressed. The coordination between assault forces, follow-up units, and logistical support required precise timing and flexible adaptation to changing tactical situations. Beach masters, representing all three services, coordinated the movement of personnel and supplies across congested beach areas, while maintaining the flow of reinforcements and ammunition. Engineer coordination proved vital for establishing and maintaining the invasion's momentum. British Royal Engineers, United States Army Corps of Engineers, and specialized units worked together to clear obstacles, construct temporary bridges, and establish communication networks. The coordination of these diverse engineering capabilities required standardized procedures and shared technical specifications. As documented in Forrest Pogue's official history, the Supreme Command, the complexity of coordinating forces from multiple nations under a unified command structure, represented a revolutionary achievement in military organization. The German command response revealed the weaknesses in their coordination systems. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was absent from his headquarters, attending his wife's birthday celebration in Germany. His absence, combined with Hitler's reluctance to release armored reserves without personal authorization, severely hampered German coordination efforts during the crucial first hours of the invasion. By evening, the Allied coordination systems had proven their effectiveness despite numerous challenges and setbacks. The successful establishment of a continuous beachhead 50 miles wide demonstrated that the unprecedented cooperation between land, sea, and air forces could overcome even the most formidable defensive positions. As the sun set over the Norman coast on June 6, 1944, General Dwight David Eisenhower received reports confirming that Allied forces had successfully established a continuous beachhead along the Calvados shore. The unprecedented coordination of land, sea, and air forces had achieved what many military experts considered impossible: the successful invasion of Hitler's Fortress Europe. The day's operations demonstrated that meticulous planning, innovative technology, and international cooperation could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The final tally of D-Day operations revealed the massive scale of Allied coordination efforts. Over 7,000 naval vessels, ranging from battleships to landing craft, had delivered 156,000 troops to Norman beaches. 13,000 aircraft had flown in support of the invasion, while 3 airborne divisions had secured vital objectives behind enemy lines. The coordination of these diverse elements under unified command represented a revolutionary achievement in military science. Post-operation analysis revealed both the successes and limitations of Allied coordination systems. At Omaha Beach, where casualties exceeded 3,000 men, coordination breakdowns had contributed to initial difficulties. Many D.D. Sherman tanks had been launched afar offshore and sank in rough seas, leaving infantry without crucial armored support. Communication failures between naval fire support vessels and ground forces had allowed German defensive positions to survive the bombardment and inflict heavy casualties on assault troops. However, the overall success of the invasion demonstrated the effectiveness of Allied coordination principles. At Utah Beach, where casualties numbered fewer than 300, excellent coordination between airborne forces, naval gunfire, and assault troops had resulted in rapid success. The 4th Infantry Division had achieved all initial objectives and established contact with paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division. By late afternoon, the air coordination achievements on D-Day established patterns that would guide Allied operations for the remainder of the European campaign. The 9th Air Force's tactical air commands had demonstrated the effectiveness of close air support. When properly coordinated with ground operations, fighter-bomber squadrons had successfully interdicted German reinforcements, moving toward the beachhead while maintaining air superiority over the invasion area throughout the day. Naval coordination successes included the effective management of the largest fleet ever assembled. Despite rough seas and enemy action, the vast majority of troops and supplies had reached their designated beaches on schedule. The naval bombardment, while not completely suppressing German defenses, has significantly reduced enemy artillery capabilities and facilitated the establishment of secure beachheads. The lessons learned from D-Day coordination would prove invaluable for subsequent Allied operations. the amphibious assaults in southern France, the crossing of major rivers, and the final assault into Germany all benefited from coordination procedures developed and tested during Operation Overlord. The successful integration of multinational forces under unified command became a model for future coalition operations. Intelligence coordination had provided Allied commanders with detailed knowledge of German defensive positions and capabilities. The combination of aerial reconnaissance, signals intelligence, and human intelligence sources had given the Allies unprecedented insight into enemy preparations. This intelligence fusion, coordinated through the Allied Intelligence Committee, had been crucial for planning successful operations. The German failure to effectively coordinate their response to the invasion demonstrated the importance of unified command and communication systems. The absence of Field Marshal Rommel, combined with Hitler's insistence on personal authorization for major troop movements, had prevented effective German counteraction during the crucial first hours. The 15th Army remained at Pas de Calais throughout D-Day, convinced by Allied deception operations that the Norman landings were merely a diversion. As midnight approached on June 6th, Allied forces controlled a beachhead 50 miles wide and varying from 3 to 10 miles deep. Over 10,000 casualties had been suffered, but the invasion had succeeded beyond the most optimistic projections. The coordination of land, sea, and air forces had achieved the impossible. The liberation of Western Europe had begun. The success of D-Day coordination established principles that extended beyond military operations. The cooperation between American, British, and Canadian forces demonstrated that international coordination could achieve objectives impossible for individual nations. These lessons would prove valuable not only for completing the victory over Nazi Germany, but also for establishing the foundations of post-war international cooperation and collective security. The greatest amphibious invasion in history has succeeded through unprecedented coordination, forever changing the course of the Second World War and demonstrating the power of unified Allied action against tyranny.